Two shots rang out in the early morning hours of January the 2nd in the tiny town of Maypearl, Texas. A man had been murdered in his sleep, and his wife of 18 years would stand trial for it. Did she kill her husband, or had a shoddy investigation doomed her to accusations and time behind bars for a crime that she didn't commit? Join us as we look into the unsettling case of Sandra Garner. Before we begin, we would like to extend our deepest sympathies to the friends and family of John Garner. This killing left a mark on the small North Texas community, and the unanswered questions will bother those who knew the man for years to come. Hi folks, let's take a moment to talk about today's sponsor, HelloFresh. As we're moving from summer into fall, things get busy and it's hard to find the time and energy to put together a good, nutritious, and delicious meal on your table. If you've got 15 minutes to cook, and even the most basic of pots and pans, a HelloFresh meal kit can turn your dinner time into the highlight of the day. They provide fresh, wholesome ingredients, all the herbs and sauces and everything else that you need to follow the instructions and create a portioned out, ready-to-go meal right out of the box. And since variety is the spice of life, HelloFresh offers some 40 chef-crafted recipes to choose from every week. You can even add on all sorts of snacks and extras from their specially curated section of over 100 items, all for 25% less than you would spend on takeout. Many times even less than what you would spend on groceries. It's delivered right to your door. Now, I recently tried 3 different menu items: the soy glazed chicken and scallion broccoli, old school deli burgers with coleslaw and crispy fried onions, and one that was spectacular, the one-pan cantina shrimp fajitas. I honestly could not have been more pleased with how easy they were to prepare, and the whole family praised how good they tasted. So go to HelloFresh.com and use the code 50BeyondEvil, 50 Beyond Evil at the checkout, and you'll get 50% off plus free shipping. It's just that simple. Go to HelloFresh.com and use the code 50 Beyond Evil, or you can just click on the link below. Maypearl, Texas is about 40 miles north of Dallas. It's a quiet little town of just under 1,000 residents in Ellis County. Located in the north-central plains of the state, it's nestled in some of the flattest prairie land to be found. It's known for its hot and humid summers and mild winters. John and Sandra Garner had moved to the town of Maypearl just 2 years before. John was a general manager with DHL Motors and was originally from Paris, Texas. He and Sandra had met 20 years before through work and struck up a romance, even though she was 13 years his junior. Sandra had been married twice before and had 2 children, Wes and Andrea Miller. After 2 years of dating, the couple married on New Year's Day. Wes would take immediately to his new stepfather, while Andrea didn't immediately warm to the man. John could be blunt and sometimes abrasive. He had a reputation as a tough boss at work, quick to terminate the employment of anyone who wasn't up to the tasks of the job. He undoubtedly loved Sandra, and when she was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis in 2014, he stood by her. As Sandra became unable to work, John became the family's only breadwinner, and he devotedly took care of her as she became less and less able to handle the tasks of life. He gained Andrea's admiration during this time as she came to see how devoted he was to her mother. It might not have been a traditional family, but it certainly seemed to be a strong one. John's father and stepmother would eventually purchase a home right across the street from the couple, cementing the close relationship the whole extended family would enjoy. And then, just the night after celebrating their 18th wedding anniversary, it would all come crashing down in gunshots, death, accusations, and betrayals. On this night, in the early hours of January 2nd, 2018, it was abnormally chilly for the tiny Texas town, with temperatures in the mid-20s. A Tuesday night, with work schedules that most people had, you can imagine that most of the residents were settled into bed, covered by their blankets, and sleeping warmly. Then a call came in to the local 911 center.
911 是我主飞，把你不等着， I need a police. I need an ambulance. My husband's shot.
Okay, what happened there?
There was a man here. I shot him. He told me not to call the police.
And do you know where the male subject went?
No, I was in Sanford, and he told me to got to 100 and not to call the police until I got to 100. He said if I called up on 100, he'd come back and kill me. Please hurry. I think we're still alive. He's making noises. Please. What can I do for him?
You want to try to hit the yard?
Yeah. Yeah.
And lay him flat back on the ground. Alone.
On the ground? You want me to get him off the bed?
Yes, ma'am, yes, ma'am. You try to do something right.
Okay. He's on the floor.
1, 2, 4.
1, 2, 3, 4.
It would take 15 minutes for officers to arrive to the scene of the crime. Maypearl Police Chief at the time, Brad Norton, was among the first to make it to the home on Cedar Creek Circle. Inside the home, Sandra Garner had dragged the body of her husband onto the floor of the bedroom and was attempting CPR as instructed by the 911 operator.
And we see a body on the floor.
His name is John.
John what?
Garner.
Officers from the local police department and the Ellis County Sheriff's Office make their way to the home, where they encounter Sandra as she pleads for assistance. They quickly check and declare that 42-year-old John Garner had died from the wounds he had received.
No, ma'am. Come on, sweetie. Come on.
Y'all gotta get him. Y'all gotta get him, please.
It dawns on the officers that they have not properly secured the house or checked to make sure that the gunman was not still on the premises. They then move from room to room, finding no one else in the home except for Sandra and the family dogs.
Did you find him?
No, ma'am. Nobody's here.
Police still didn't have the murder weapon. After searching the property and vehicles several times, they found a rusty gun.
As first responders and other medical personnel enter the home, Chief Norton brought Sandra to the front room of the house and began questioning her about what had happened.
Were you able to see him?
He was white.
He was a white male?
He had blue jeans on with blue hoodie and mask. And I looked at his face once, but I was afraid if I looked again, he was going to kill me.
Chief Boyd would then also begin taking photographs using his cell phone of the crime scene, Sandra and her clothing, and then all around the house and property.
Could I get you stood right there? I have to pull my phone out.
Get a real close up here if you don't mind.
Sandra would then be taken down to the Ellis County Sheriff's Office for further questioning. There, her hands would be swabbed for gunshot residue and her clothes would be taken as well after she had been photographed in them in better lighting than what had been at the home. Testing would show no traces of gunpowder residue on her hands and only 3 tiny pieces of residue on the left sleeve of her shirt, the sleeve that would have been closest to her husband in bed at the time of the shooting. She would then be questioned by Chief Norton, looking for any kinds of leads that would help them find who had murdered John Garner.
Did you wake up in there before the incident? You heard a gunshot?
The 2 gunshots. And then somehow I ended up on the floor beside the bed. I started screaming, hoping somebody would kill me. I said, "Shut up. Please don't kill me." So I worked my ass off. And then I said, "I lost my house. I lost my life. I lost my kid."
Sandra said that she took the shooter to the closet of their bedroom where they kept personal records and cash inside a fireproof lockbox. Before opening the closet door, which turned on an automated light within, Sandra had not been able to get a good look at the man in the darkness of their bedroom. Before that moment, she had only been able to tell that he held a flashlight in one hand and a gun in the other.
He had a mask on. All I could see was eyes.
She would hand him all of the cash that was in the lockbox. She told Chief Norton that she couldn't be exactly sure on how much money was in there at the moment, but she had counted it a few days earlier and there was $18,000 at that time. The killer, she said, took the money and then told her to count to 100 before she called the police. He said that if he heard sirens or saw police before the count of 100 was reached, he would come back into the house and kill her. Sandra said that she counted as quickly as she could, then called the police. Where did the masked man go, though? In the minute or two it would have taken for Sandra to count to 100, how far could the man have made it? The Garner's home is located in a circular loop off the main road. The houses, while fairly well spaced between each other, they were still close enough together to keep an eye on each other. Curiously, there were no reports of any strange vehicles in the area, and no one reported the sound of a car leaving in a hurry. Could the assailant have left on foot? The little neighborhood was surrounded by a sizable amount of open land, including a large field and a sizable pond. Anyone trying to escape in that direction would have to have some knowledge of the area to get out without getting lost or being spotted on someone else's property. If the assailant was who they said they were, they'd have to be someone fired by John since he had begun working at DHL, and all of those people would eventually be ruled out by investigators. Could it have been someone from his days at WePack or the Campbell Soup Company? It's very unlikely that anyone from Paris, Texas, some 2 hours and 20 minutes away, would have the kind of knowledge of the area around the Garner's home. Still, the idea that an assailant could just drive away from the scene couldn't be ruled out simply because of the 15 minutes or more that it took for police to arrive on the scene. Investigators would later admit that while Sandra never strayed from or changed her story at all from that night, there were some details that made it shaky. It was just one of many things that couldn't be nailed down about this case. While Sandra was being questioned, police and forensic personnel combed the house and the area for any kinds of clues. Additional photographs were taken by the forensics team, which would prove to be vital in the investigation, not necessarily because of what they revealed, but because all of the photographs that had been taken earlier on Police Chief Norton's cell phone would disappear before they could be transferred and saved for prosecutors. The loss of those photos would add more shakiness to whatever case that they would eventually build. Forensics also had a difficult time because of the amount of people that had been in and out of the house immediately following the murder. Police made no attempt to seal off the home once they had determined that John was dead, so first responders and ambulance personnel had walked through the crime scene, potentially contaminating it or accidentally destroying important evidence. After Sandra had been questioned and checked for gunshot residue, she was taken back to the home, to the scene of the crime, at her request. Once arriving there, she was met by friends and neighbors and had the terrible task of telling them what had happened. John's parents and siblings had been among the group on hand and had to learn of their son's murder there. As people comforted Sandra, one individual member of the family had left and had contacted law enforcement on his own, her son, Wes Miller. Wes would tell Lieutenant Shane Thompson of the Ellis County Sheriff's Department that he had suspicions that things were not as they seemed. He would say that the suspect they needed to look more closely at was his own mother.
So you worked on until I said, if she did something, I don't understand why. What's your thoughts? I guess I'm wrong, man.
He would then continue suggesting that Sandra could have been the real killer.
Dog, big dog.
The dogs. Why are they going? How the so-and-so knew how to get in? And for somebody to sneak up on them like that?
He then told Chief Norton that Sandra had her own gun and that she kept it under the seat of her car.
She could do more. She used to keep it in purse, but I was saying, underneath the seat in the car, that's where I was she
Except that when police had looked in the car on the night of the shooting, they didn't find anything under the seat. Elsewhere in the house, they found quite an arsenal, one that consisted of 49 pistols and 12 rifles and shotguns. John and Sandra owned numerous firearms, all legally, and they were either secured in gun cabinets or put in places out of sight that could be reached quickly if needed. One pistol from their collection, Sandra's own pistol, a Taurus 856 revolver in .38 special caliber, was missing and was not on the inventory the police took of the firearms that night. Investigators went back and searched in the detached garage, checking the Mustang, but found no weapons. Investigators made what would be a huge mistake, though, in not first checking the door handles of the car for fingerprints to determine who may or may not have accessed the car and whatever might have been in it. Wes would then let the chief know that he had been at the Garner's home that evening, but had left early on.
I got home, let me sit back over here and watch Netflix.
Wes would also speak with Lieutenant Shane Thompson of the Ellis County Sheriff's Office, telling him of his suspicions again the next day.
What I say to you, are you going to play it back to my mom?
Somebody has said that your mom only had 30-day revolver.
She does have a revolver. But I thought it was in her Mustang, and she says she never put it in her Mustang. And if she did, it'll be honest.
Police would come back again and search the garage. This time, the garage and the car were locked. Sandra was across the street with the Garner family when an officer came to the door and asked for the keys. Witnesses said that she was very angry that they were asking for the keys and that she initially refused. She did provide the keys, however, later explaining she was just fed up and stressed from the murder and the investigation. Inside the garage, the Mustang offered up a damning piece of evidence. The case had taken a massive turn, and now there seemed to be no doubt that Sandra Garner was the #1 suspect in the murder of her husband. She was brought back in for questioning. This time, the investigators were assisted by a member of the Texas Rangers. Sandra stuck to her original story.
Need you to be honest.
I swear I'm trying to be honest with you. You don't think I'm being honest?
Did something happen? With him.
He's my husband.
We want you to tell us. That's what we're here for.
To tell you what? You want me to say that I did it when I didn't?
We want you to tell us the truth. That's it.
I told you the truth.
You're not telling us the truth. When did you put that gun in your car?
I don't have a gun in my car. Are you serious? I don't put a gun in my car, y'all. I swear. Where was there a gun in my car? No, you're trying to get me to admit something I didn't do.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And I'm done talking to you.
The pistol, which had been found wrapped in a damp towel, would turn out to have no fingerprints or traces of DNA on it. Forensic ballistic experts would determine, however, that the rounds test fired from it matched those found in John Garner's body. Despite the miraculous and yet unexplained reappearance of the gun in the car, there was no doubt that the murder weapon had been found. Sandra Garner was arrested and charged with first-degree murder in the death of her husband, John Garner. Bail would be set at $2 million, an amount Sandra would be unable to put up to secure her freedom as she awaited trial. She would not be allowed out to attend her husband's funeral on January the 13th. She would spend 21 months in jail before coming to trial in room 308 of the Ellis County Courthouse in Waxahachie, Texas. The nearly 2 years in jail had visibly worn down Sandra as she awaited her day in court, still suffering from multiple sclerosis and the toll it would take on her in the Spartan living conditions of a jail cell. Represented by attorney Tom Pappas, Sandra would be in the line of fire for prosecutors Linda Beatty and Ricky Sipes. The smoking gun for the sake of their case would turn out to be the rusting revolver found under the seat of Sandra's Mustang.
The murder weapon was Sandra Garner's gun.
Damn it! I forgot the gun. I wore my trusty mask so no one would know who I was. But I'm gonna have a 10-minute conversation with Sandra about who I am and why I'm doing this.
They also leaned heavily into what they found on an iPad found in the Garner's bedroom. In the modern world, investigators often find that people's electronic devices often provide powerful leads and evidence. And this time, this particular iPad would tell part of the tale. On the iPad, there was a search just 4 days prior to the murder for ways to kill someone in their sleep, and even had a link that had been followed to a story about how to kill someone and not get caught. One thing that the prosecution team did not have was a motive. Why would Sandra kill her husband after celebrating 18 years of marriage with him? What did she gain from his death? In truth, she would lose the person who took care of her during her illness and provided the only income for the house. While the two were doing well for themselves, they weren't independently wealthy, and without his income, even with his life insurance, times would have been terribly difficult for Sandra without him around. It just didn't make sense to the defense attorney, Pappas, and he made sure that the jury would see that as well.
Make no mistake, she didn't shoot John.
He would lay out a case that not only was Sandra in no way the murderer because of the poor work of the Maypearl Police Department, they had missed the ample opportunities to both clear her and find evidence of who had actually done the crime.
Sandra was lying right next to John when he was shot. She pulled the body off the bed and she did chest compressions.
If she had fired the gun that killed her husband, where was the residue from the gunshot? Why didn't they find any on her hands and only the tiniest amounts on her clothing? Had Police Chief Norton removed her from the scene and bagged her hands, it could have been proven that she had not wiped away any of the residue. While the practice is used to generally prove someone was the wielder of the gun, this time it could have made certain that she wasn't, clearing her name. Then Pappas brought into question how many people were in the house, moving around the crime scene before the forensics team arrived. So many potential clues could have been lost in the rush to render aid at the scene that would have put the case in jeopardy. Lost photos taken by Chief Norton also played into Pappas portraying the investigation as incomplete, inept, and at times incompetent.
The investigation was messed up. The police searched that house, and they screwed a lot of stuff up.
The prosecution team still felt they had a case.
Law enforcement poured their heart and their soul into this investigation. It may not have been perfect.
The defense, however, felt that they had neglected someone who could certainly be considered a suspect in the case, Wes Miller, Sandra's son, who had quickly come to them to tell them that he thought she had done the crime. Wes, it turns out, had been at the house earlier in the week. In particular, he had been there on the night that the web searches about murder had been made on the iPad. And in the Garner home, neither their iPad nor their phones were password protected. In addition, Pappas pointed out that while Wes had pointed them to where the gun had been found, police had not secured the car beforehand or taken fingerprints from the door handles on either the night of the incident or right before they opened it and found the gun. By not doing so, they had missed any opportunity to find fingerprints that might have cleared his client and led them to someone else, someone who could have taken the gun, used it, and then concealed it inside the Mustang.
Wes should have been a suspect. His conduct, when you really look at it objectively and look at Sandra objectively, is more suspicious than hers.
They didn't look at Wes. They didn't understand that he didn't have an alibi.
And that's an example of where they just gloss over stuff.
The prosecution would say they did not feel that Wes was a suspect for a number of reasons.
If it was Wes Miller, she would know her own son. There's no way she doesn't know if it's him.
Both prosecutors Beatty and Sipes would also contend that Wes was neither smart enough to come up with such a plan, and that he also didn't have the intestinal fortitude to kill John or anyone else for that matter. It wasn't a ringing endorsement for the man, but it also didn't acknowledge that if he wasn't smart enough to commit the crime, how could he have been smart enough to figure out that Sandra had done it? In the end, some 27 witnesses were brought before the jury and over 400 pieces of evidence were displayed before the trial was put to the question. It took the jury only 3 hours to come to a conclusion and render their decision.
If the defendant, please stand. We, the jury, find the defendant, Sandra Louise Garner, not guilty.
Sandra Garner, after losing her husband and spending 21 long months in jail, would be allowed to go free. She would be met by family and well-wishers as she left the Ellis County Jail. She would return to her home where nearly 2 years before her husband had been brutally murdered. John Garner's father and stepmother would move away not long after that. They've had no contact with Sandra Garner, but have maintained a relationship with Wes. Sandra has not. Somewhere out there, the killer of John Garner remains free, whoever that may be. If you found this case compelling, don't forget to like the video. Comments down below your take on it, and please subscribe to the channel. Also hit the notification bell in order to stay up to date each time we reveal a new shocking case. Until next time, stay safe and keep your eyes peeled. You never know what's lurking in the shadows.